I'm Joy Hogge. I'm the Executive Director of Families as Allies. And this is a discussion we do once a month just to talk about policy and some of the things we're looking at. So if there are things you're interested in too, we have the chance to work together. And also so all of you can share things that you might be working on. So we can support each other with those. And the legislative session has started. And so this is the first time we've done this, I believe, since the legislative session started. So we will go over just some basics about legislation, which I know some of you have been working on legislation for a long time. For others, it may be new. But we'll just go over because that's one of the things we said we do is like, how in the world do you find a bill? How do you figure out what might be relevant to your family? And we'll just show you some ways that we do all that here. And then if y'all like have some other tips or ways that you follow some things, please also feel free to chime in. So before I start sharing my screen and we look at the legislative website, did that bring any thoughts to mind for anyone or anything y'all want to make sure we talk about? Or if your organizations have bills. Now, Ellen, I think one bill that I know y'all are following is on our list about corporal punishment or any other big issues.
No, that's the only one right now.
Okay. Okay. All right. So I'm going to share my screen. And sometimes I have better luck than others sharing. Getting the right one. Okay. So we are going to go to the Mississippi State Legislature website. And you can just Google Mississippi State Legislature and it will come up if you're wondering like how to find it. And then once you get here, and I know some of you are old, have been doing this a long time. For others, it may be new. I actually think that this website is compared to other states that they do a good job. And these tabs at the top are really helpful and they're basically exactly what they say they are. So the first thing is you can look and see who the legislators are. And we're going to back up actually one step before that because sometimes people are like, I have no idea who my legislators are. So we're going to look at open, and this is actually open states, find your legislator. This is one way you can do it. And it's now plural policy. And you can go here if you don't know who your legislator is, and you have state legislators and you also have federal ones. So we're going to we'll use my address. Now everybody knows where I live. Okay. Oops. And you can see, we come down here and we can see my state senator and upper chamber means Senate is David Blunt. And my state representative is Earl Banks. So right now we're talking about we're talking about bills in the state legislature. So if I want to talk to somebody about that, it's going to be one of these two people. There's also federal bills at the national level, and everybody in Mississippi has the same two senators, Cindy Hyde Smith and Roger Wicker. And then depending on where you live in Mississippi, your representative might be different. So mine is Michael Guest. But for today, we're going to think about our state legislators. So David Blunt and Earl Banks. That's who we're going to look at. Now I have so many tabs open. I'm just going to go to Mississippi State Legislature again. So let's just say I want to talk to one of them. We're going to go to legislators. Got too much going on here. And we're going to click on representatives. So I found out that my representative is Earl Banks, and I want to know how to contact him. I'm going to go here, and here's his biography, including his phone numbers. Now, some of them give their home and work phone numbers, some don't. But if they're on here, sometimes people think, oh, I shouldn't call him at home or I shouldn't call him on his cell. Remember, they're elected. We elected them to represent us. So any of these numbers you can use. And you can also call the main capital switchboard number and leave them a message. That can be really effective. His email is on here too, and it looks like he uses his law office email. You can always email legislators. A lot of times during the session, they're not going to check their email that much because they're so busy, and they're going to respond better to phone calls or just going up there and visiting. But we found him. Okay. So now we're going to look, and we're going to look for my state senator. And we know my state senator we looked up was David Blunt. So here he is. Now, David, and I think he used to have a cell phone on here, and I noticed I don't think he does anymore, but he's got an office number at the Capitol. So you can call and leave a message there, try to reach him there. Okay, so that's how we find our legislators. Now we're going to look at legislation. So there's different ways to look up legislation. One is, I'm sorry, I'm messing it up. Just looking up, I don't know why this is double on here. I may have too many things open. Let me close some things. I don't see. I don't know what I'm doing wrong. Okay, we'll just do it this way. Okay, we're at the legislation tab. We can do measure search. Now, if we know a bill that we want to check on, if we already know the number, what's the number of your bill, Helen? Or Ellen, I'm sorry, we'll look at that. Is that 5? She may not be where she can talk. Okay, let's say I know one bill we're looking at is 407. So I can put that in there. I can retrieve the measure. So this is a bill about the Department of Mental Health, and it would allow them to set minimum standards for the services for privately owned providers. Right now, they just do it for people they certify, but this would allow them to do that for all providers. So here's this bill, and I want to see what else going on at that. So this tells me a little bit about what it does. It tells me whether or not there's any money that's attached to it. And that helps me know what the deadlines are going to be with it. Because if there's money attached to it, it's going to have later deadlines. What kind of bill it is, what part of the code it's going to modify, what committee it went to, and who introduced it. And then this describes it. So, and like what's happened to it so far. And right now we're at the beginning of the session, and the first thing that happens to bills after they get introduced is they get assigned to a committee. So we can see it got referred to the Public Health and Human Services Committee. We can also come over here and we can look at what this bill actually says. And there's usually at least two different things you can click on. I always click on the PDF because that gives line numbers. So if you want to ask a question about it, you can say in line number 17, it says this. And then I'm looking through, and typically this isn't always true, but if you're going through what is on here that's just already written on here, that's what's already in the code. So these things are not new. And what we're looking for is anything that's underlined or that's struck out. So that's just sort of a quick cheat thing. And sometimes you have to scroll quite a ways because it's going to have the whole code section. So this is a bunch of different stuff about the Department of Mental Health. Okay, so now it's adding that effective this coming July, that one of the duties of the Department of Mental Health, this is what this law is being proposed to do, is to certify, coordinate, and establish minimum standards and establish minimum required services as specified in another part of the section for the certification of privately owned mental health providers who are not a part of the state operated mental health community providers and do not receive funding from the state mental health funds provided by the Department of Mental Health. So it's saying these additional certification classifications shall be required to meet minimum standards for services and safety of those promulgated for regional and community mental health providers. So I'm not even sure exactly how then they won't have to provide financial data. So I think this is talking maybe about a place like Brentwood, maybe a place like Mill Creek. So it's just saying that the Department of Mental Health would have authority over them and they'd have to be certified by them. Okay, so we're following that bill because it's related to mental health. And if we're following it, it just means we think it's related to our mission. We're not even saying we have an opinion on it. Yeah. So that's how we find bills. Now let's go back and let's just say that we don't we know that we're interested in something, but we don't even know if there's a bill about it. Let's see, like, what would we do then? We're going to do a text search. So we're going to come down here to 2025 regular session text search. And this says not dead measures. We haven't gone through any deadlines, so there's nothing that's dead yet. Those are some things you could see I've looked at in the past. This is one thing I'm curious what will come up. One thing that we're thinking about is there is money that was given to all the states, and it's a lot of money for the opioid settlement agreement. You know, that those companies that made pain pills or pain medication that got overprescribed and then people got hooked. There was this huge settlement of money they had to pay because they were found guilty of getting people addicted. And it's supposed to go to the states. And there's in the states are supposed to have a committee that helps decide how that money should be spent. And that hasn't really happened yet in Mississippi. So we're curious if that committee is being set up, and even more so, if it is being set up, are people who have had problems with opioids, who have lived experience with that, are they on that committee? So let's just see if we can find anything about opioid settlement, any bills about that by putting in these, and I'm doing word tense conflation so that if it's like it says opioids settle or something, we'll find it. So let's see what we find. It's a bad request. Okay. Well, it's not liking me today. Let's try it over here. Hmm. Okay, so that feature may just not be working because I think I'm doing this right. But that's a way when that's working that you can find that. You might also know, let's just say, I'm curious about that. I want to know what's going on. And I'm thinking, I bet that might have been addressed or introduced to the Committee of Public Health on the House side. So we can go to this list of measures by committee, and these are all the committees in the House. And a lot of them. And let's go to Public Health and Human Services. Now, there's going to be a lot of things on there, but we can kind of glance and see, do we see anything about opioids on here? Opioid settlement. And the public health committees on both sides, it's interesting to go through and just see because there's usually stuff across a spectrum that we might be interested in. That bill we just looked at is in this committee. Okay, opioid settlement. Opioid Settlement Committee create to disperse opioid litigation settlement monies. And Representative Sam Creekmore introduced that. So we found one. Now there may be others, but let's see what's happened to this. And if we want to read the text right away, we start over here and click the number. If we want to find out what's going on with this bill, we click down here where all these letters are that right now don't necessarily make sense. So here's an opioid settlement fund committee. An act to create an opioid settlement fund committee for the purpose of, determining how this money should be spent. And we can see this one got referred to Public Health and Human Services, and it's double referred. It's also going to Appropriations D. Now, there's no fiscal note attached to it. If there is money attached to it, a lot of times it goes to the regular committee and then to appropriations to deal with the money. Sometimes they get double referred because somebody doesn't want it to move ahead, or it gets double referred because there really are things from two different committees that it needs to be looked at. But if you're following a bill that's double referred, you want to watch it more closely because it may be, it's going to be harder for it to get through. But this one has already gotten through. So this is what DS, title sufficient, DP means title sufficient, do pass. So they said this is good the way it is. This committee, Public Health, approved it and passed it. And so now it's gone to the Appropriations Committee for them to look at it. So this one's double referred, but it looks like they're trying to move it through. And then again, if we want to look at the actual language of the bill, we click on PDF, and then here we go. Now, this is all new, so we don't have underlined, but this is who they're proposing to put on this committee. So it's these people or their designee. So it could be someone they pick from their office or from somewhere else. to decide how this money should be spent. So we got the governor, lieutenant governor, speaker of the House, director of the Department of Mental Health, director of health, education, someone from the courts, municipal league. You see all these, a lot of governmental people, fire chiefs, law enforcement, then chairs, so some legislators. Okay. Do y'all, when you see that, that list, like we're looking through this, do y'all see anybody a group of people that might be left off of here? And this says give the purpose that they're going to decide how this money should be used. And I know we're talking about a lot of different things. I'll tell you one reason we're watching this whole issue is, are there people with lived experience? So are there people who are in recovery from an opioid use disorder? Are they on this committee? Are their families on this committee? Are people who treat those people, who know about effective opioid treatments, are they on this committee? And that's some things we're not seeing on here. Now, it's possible that someone on here might appoint someone like that, but there's no guarantee of that. So that's something with this bill. It's good that Mississippi is starting to look at this, but there's some ways this bill could be made better. All right, then we'll look at what you're going to do if you are looking at a bill where that might be true. Okay. Okay, so we basically looked at different ways you can look up a bill. So you can look it up by the number. If you happen to know the code section, you can do that. You can do a text search. You can do it by committee, by author. We didn't look up one by author. Let's just see. Go on the House side. All right, we know we were just looking at a bill by Sam Creekmore, Representative Creekmore. Let's look at what else he's introduced so far. I think he's introduced a lot. He's got a lot of stuff about mental health, school resource officers, some things for veterans. I think he has some on veterans, a lot of mental health and school resource officers. So if we're like, oh, we know he introduced a bill, we can go here and look. So those are different ways you can look that up. Then, we talked about committees. So there's a tab here. You can go and look at who's on all these committees. That can be important because if you're following a bill, the person you want to contact, it's great if you know somebody on the committee. It's great if you know whoever authored the bill. But once that bill gets to a committee, the most important person that's going to influence what happens is the chairman of that committee. Any thoughts on why that is? And I know some of you know this like the back of your hand, but why would we want to talk to the chairman once it gets to that committee? Does anybody know if all bills that get to a committee, do they get brought up in the committee? The committee's got to vote on them. They have to come out of that committee to move ahead. Do you think everything that goes to a committee gets voted on? It doesn't. So it would be really, really nice if all of these bills got to their committees, and the committee meetings are public. So you can look at the schedule. on the website, and you can watch most of the Senate ones you can watch online, and some of the House ones you can, I think. Um, and you can always go up there and watch them. But not it would be great if every bill got brought up and they talked about it, but they don't. And the person who decides whether or not that bill's going to be brought up in committee for discussion is the chair. So the main person you want to talk to if you're following a bill and it's gone to a committee is the chair. I wasn't watching it. And the chairperson in this case, you're right, in a nonprofit, they report directly to a board of directors. In this case, the chairs of those committees are reporting to whoever, and they don't have to do what it's an interesting relationship. On and these committees, the chairs are probably going to coordinate, like on the Senate side, they're going to probably coordinate with the lieutenant governor. And on the House side, they are going to coordinate some with the Speaker of the House. And those are the people who appoint the chairs. But remember, this is an elected body of officials. So they answer to the people and that's who they should be thinking about. So a chairman doesn't have to do, and this is good, what the lieutenant governor says or what the Speaker of the House says. They need to do what they think is best for that committee, hopefully based on what the constituents want. So we're constituents. We have every right to call them, and you have every right to get in touch with that chairman. And you can come here and you can see who those chairs are. This is on the House side. And this is on the Senate side. And you can figure out who that is, where your bill went. Figure out who the chair is. Let's see who public health is. I think it's called something different. There's named slightly different on the two sides. Okay, Hogge Bryant. So then we can go back, and I get so many tabs open, I can't see what I'm doing. And we can go back to those legislators. And let's say Hogge Bryant is this, I've got a bill that's gone to his committee. I can look him up here and I can contact him. Now I would definitely recommend calling rather than emailing, and he doesn't even have his email on here, so you would call. But you can let him know about a bill. Okay. So I'm gonna pause there. That's going through a lot of different things about legislation and committees. Any thoughts or questions? Is everybody still with us?
Just to add a little bit, I appreciate the information, Mr. Holt. I'd never been to this site and didn't realize it was so reliable. So I appreciate all of the information. I'm very new to the website. So thank you so much for walking us step by step through
Absolutely.
everything.
Any other comments or thoughts? And then we'll look at like, how do I even know when these committee meetings are? Okay, then you can come to this tab, and all of this stuff is really helpful. And you see the House calendar. That just tells you, the calendars tell you what are they doing today. It's like you're looking at their daytime. Here's the Senate calendar. So this is what they're doing today. What's on the calendar for them. Now, this is when they're in chambers. So it looks like they're doing much more in their committees because there's not much for when they're in the chamber. Now let's look at the schedules. I'm going to go to the Senate schedule. All right, this tells you when these different committees meet and what room they meet in. And remember, and I love Alice Clark. She is the first African American legislator, I think, in the state, African American woman. And she just, this last time was the first time she didn't run because it was just too much for her health. She's getting older and having a little more troubles with her health, but she's an amazing woman. And one of my favorite things is whenever she greeted people at the Capitol, she would say, "Welcome to your capital. It is your capital." I think sometimes people feel like, "Ooh, can I really go up there?" Yes, it's your capital. So you can go up there, and this tells you who's meeting and what they're doing. So there's a bunch of appropriations meetings going on right now, um, about the different state agencies and their budgets. So you can go up there and it tells you the room, it tells you when the S chambers means SCHAMBs means they're in the Senate chambers. Um, and you can go to any of these meetings. Now, this is a little different because appropriations needs to get a bunch of stuff done right now to look at these budgets. So the schedule will probably change. Like they're not going to have to meet every Wednesday like this. So you'll start seeing things like if it's the same as last year, I think public health and welfare almost always met on Mondays and Wednesdays at 3:30. You'll start seeing some regularity. And then one thing that's really nice on the Senate side is you can actually look and see what the agenda is for their different meetings. And that means they're not doing it yet because they haven't been in session long enough. These are just people presenting on budgets, which that's important too. But what you'll start seeing on the Senate agendas, the committee agendas within a few days, you'll see the bills they're going to go over. And you'll see the bills they're going to vote on. So if you're following a bill, you can go up there and see. The House isn't quite as good about providing that information, but let's just see. Maybe lying. So now they've started showing us their standing meetings, but they don't typically show what bills they're going to go over. But you can call up there and ask. Now, if you're following a bill that you want to pass, then you really want to urge that chairman to bring it up in committee for a vote. Let's say there's a bill you don't think is a good bill. You can use that, the fact that they don't bring everything up to your advantage. You can let them know, I don't think this is a good bill to bring up in committee. This is why. Like maybe it's going to, even though people didn't mean it this way, you think it's going to be hard on a group of people you work with. You could say it needs more work. Now they can always change bills, but and they do change them a lot in committee. And that's another thing you can talk to them about. You can say it's a good bill, but I think it needs a change, and you can tell them what you think the change needs to be. So that's on those tabs. Thank you, Linda. Now let's look at this tab. This is our general information. This is some legislative deadlines. And all the stuff I'm talking about. Is it still alive? Is it this? Is it that? Okay, we are, it's January 22nd. So we have gone past two deadlines. One was for them to get these bills written up. and get help drafting them because I get help from the attorneys up there. Okay. And then this was a biggie, and it always happens on Martin Luther King Jr. Day, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Day. And I won't say anything about that. I just think that's very interesting. That is the deadline for introduction of all these general bills, the ones that don't have to do with money. And there's usually about 2,000 bills introduced by that time. So, that all of those had to be in by Monday. They're not all posted yet because it takes a while to get them posted on the website. So we've gone past that. So now all those bills are getting assigned to committees, and those committees are looking at them, and that chairman's thinking, do I bring it up? Do I not bring it up? And they vote on them. So the next deadline is Tuesday, February 4th. So that's what, approximately a couple weeks from now. Is that right? That's the deadline for committees to report general bills and constitutional amendments originating in their own house. So what happens on our side, like all the Senate bills and their Senate committees, they have to come out of committee by January 20th. Oh, I'm sorry, by February 4th. I know I'm being confusing, or else they die. So it doesn't move forward. Now, there's still ways to get things in there, like if you're following a bill and it dies, but it gets a lot trickier after that. So that's the next committee we're looking at. We're going to look at a different document to find out what all of these things mean. But you can come back to this document and say, when's the deadline for this? So the next thing we're thinking about is if there's a bill you're interested in, and do you want it to keep going? Then you want it to make it out of committee by February 4th, and they will be up there till late in the day on February 4th. They'll have extra committee meetings. They will be doing a lot. And if you don't want it to come out, to try to talk to the chairman about not bringing it up, because then it can just die. Now, let's look. Also on this general information, now some of this stuff gets really detailed, like the Senate rules of how they do things. You can look at the Mississippi Code, which is all the laws in Mississippi, their rules, there's all kinds of stuff. But this is what I find one thing that's really important is how a bill becomes a law. And this is just kind of like what we used, there was that TV show, except that probably all of y'all are too young to remember it, where we learn about this. So we've just talked about this. It gets introduced, a bill gets introduced. So somebody writes it, it gets introduced, and it goes to a committee. So that's where everything is now. Then the committee hopefully has hearings on it, but we just learned that a lot of times they don't debate them. They just let them die. Then those bills, the report of committee means it comes out of the committee saying, yes, we voted this out of committee. Now they may amend it in there, but we're sending it to our full house, or our full chamber. So the Senate bills go to the Senate, and then the House bills go to the House, and then they get placed on the calendar. That's one of those things we looked at, like what are they doing today? That just had one or two things on it now. By this time, there will be a whole bunch of bills on there that they're going to vote on. Now, on the Senate side, the lieutenant governor may or may not put it on the calendar. They may put it on the calendar and skip it. So, and same thing on the House side with the Speaker of the House. So by the time your bill gets here, and we put this stuff out during the session, you're going to be wanting to look at the Speaker or the lieutenant governor if you're trying to get something to happen with your bill. But hopefully you've got a bill, you think it's a good bill, they put it on the calendar, then that whole chamber votes on it. So the Senate votes on the Senate bills and the House votes on the House. And again, it has to pass. It might not pass. So it may be a bill, like if you're trying to get a bill killed, at that point, you're trying to get like let's say you're part of an organization, and I'm not telling people to lobby who aren't supposed to lobby, but let's say you're part of an informal group and you're trying to not let a bill pass, then you could get all those people who might be interested in it to start calling their individual legislator on that side and ask them not to vote for it. So then, if it passes, say it's a Senate bill and it gets out of the Senate, it goes to the House and the same thing happens. It gets assigned to a committee. They debate some of the bills. They don't bring some of them up. Comes out of committee or else it dies. Gets placed on that calendar. Then they vote on it. Now, all along this way, it can get amended and changed. So then, if both sides pass the bill and they both say, yeah, we like this bill as it is, then it goes to the governor and the governor has to sign it for it to become a law. And the governor generally signs most bills, but there may be bills the governor says, no, I'm not signing this. If it's not signed by the governor, then it goes back and they have to vote again, but they have to vote like by a 2/3 majority to override what the governor's veto. But another thing that sometimes happens is the bill, one version passes in one house, and then another version passes in the other side, like in the Senate, and they don't agree. Then it has to go. Oh, and let's say they don't agree, but the other side says, okay, we'll go with your changes. Same things happen. It goes to the governor. What if the side, they have different versions and the Senate says, we don't agree with you. We're not going to accept your changes. Then this is at the very end of the session. Then the bill gets sent to a conference committee. And there's 3 people from each side, 3 senators appointed, 3 representatives, and they get together and work out the differences. In our state, those rules that are on their own website say that those conference committees are supposed to be open. There's a big issue with that they'll have those committee meetings without making them public. You need to know if you're following something and it gets to those point, their own rules, and we've got this language say that they're supposed to have those meetings open. So that's something you can use at that point and say, I really want to be in that meeting. Please let me know what it is when it is. I know your rules say this. And then both sides, they come up with a report, usually. Then it has to go back to both sides. They both have to vote on it. If they both vote that they're going to accept it, then it goes to the governor. So that's, you can, and nobody's expecting you to remember all this, but this is a very, very handy chart. Yes, and I love this graphic too. Whoops. I love this graphic. It's very handy. Okay. All right, so that is, now let me show you one other thing. This is one thing we do during the session. We go to, well, we go to all, we start with all measures not dead, which is nothing's dead right now. And at the beginning of the session, we just go through, and you'll see this in our newsletter, and there's like going to be 2,000, I'm not kidding, bills on here. We just skim this and we just look for titles of anything that we think might be related to our mission and vision. And we make a list and we just share that these are things we're starting to follow. That's where we start. And I think I have to do a new share. So right now, and this is very messy. Right now, this is that list, and we're just working on it. So I've gone through all the bills, and I just put on here, now the spacing's way off and messed up. Any bill that might be related. And I'm sure I missed some. And then typically we will take them and put them in categories like mental health, special health care needs, child welfare, Medicaid, juvenile justice, and then transparency, because that's a biggie in Mississippi, which is like in education. People being able, the transparency one is like people being able to go to meetings and get information. So, and then we put this out in our newsletter every week. And then we keep following, what happens to these bills. If we have a bill on here, it doesn't mean we're supporting it, doesn't mean we're not supporting it. We're just following it because it's relevant to our mission. And we share those in our newsletter. Well, let me show you one other thing here. On this, another thing that's really helpful is, where did it go? Daily action reports. Let's just say you're kind of caught up, but you caught up through yesterday, what's been going on up there. Then you can go to today, and this will show you what's happening up there, what they have done so far today. So you can check the daily action report every day and just see what they're doing.